I'm Nicole Robinson, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Nicole Robinson to the show. Nicole is the Chief Marketing Officer of andBeyond, where she leads the global brand and digital marketing strategy for the luxury adventure company. She spent more than 25 years with the company, holding various roles across finance, risk, commercial, and now marketing. Her tenure first began in the late 1990s when she was tasked with auditing the business in her role as a chartered accountant with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Today, her role as CMO has expanded to include stewardship of andBeyond's 2030 impact strategy, aligning the company's for-profit operations with its nonprofit partner, Wild Impact. Nicole, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks, Katie. It's so great to join you.
I'm really excited for this conversation. I think let's just start at the beginning. For someone who is unfamiliar, can you give us an overview of andBeyond?
Sure. So andBeyond is in its 35th year this year. We started in 1991 with a small, by rewilding 4 pieces of land. So it was a small company with just 2 lodges on it at that stage. We have expanded over the last 35 years to over 30 lodges, yachts, and camps across 3 continents. And we also are a bespoke travel agent or a tour operator on those 3 continents as well. So we have as significant a travel service or travel planning service as our lodge, camp, and yacht portfolio. The thing that makes us probably the most sort of distinctive in the hospitality industry is where we operate. We have chosen to operate in some of the world's most rarest and irreplaceable places. The places that take you a little bit out of your comfort zone, off the beaten track, and the places that are sort of high in biodiversity in either species, biodiversity in fauna and flora, but also rare in terms of culture. And all of these places need to be protected in some form for generations to come. They're all under threat, and they're all irreplaceable. And so it's a great privilege to operate in those areas.
I'm excited to talk more about the business and about the destination specifically. But speaking of rare, you started at the company as an auditor, not a marketer. As someone who is a marketer, I love this story. It's incredible. Did you ever think that you'd be here 25 years later, now as CMO?
I say my daughter's 21 and she's in university at the moment. And the one thing I've said to her is learn how to learn, because your path is not a straight line. And opportunities come your way. And really, at 18, 19, what do you really know about what you want? You get told what your aptitude is. You get told what you're specifically good at. In the world of AI now, it's even more so that you don't really know what opportunities the future is going to bring. So there is no way I would have said if you had asked me in 1999 when I started that this is where I'd land up, I wouldn't have said it. I funnily enough did a double major. So I did finance and I did marketing. I met my husband at university and he was doing marketing. And so I don't know if I studied marketing because of him or because of I loved marketing. But I really, really loved the storytelling part. I loved the creativity of marketing. And if you had ever guessed, even while I was an accountant, that I was an accountant, I would have been properly insulted. I'd like to say I was a very creative accountant. I like to tell stories with the numbers. And I loved creative problem solving. So there was, there's creativity even in finance that can be unlocked. It's an amazing foundation for anything. And I found it really, really useful, even, in the world of digital marketing, calculating return on ad spend it's really useful to have that commercial backbone as a foundation. Yeah.
I am a fellow number nerd myself, so I completely resonate with what you're saying. And I really love that advice that you're giving to your daughter because you're right. When we are 18, 19 years old, I always laugh like the idea of picking a major and thinking like this is going to be the one path that you walk down. It's a bit ridiculous. And actually, I would think if I could go back and change anything, I was a fashion merchandising major. So talk about quite specific. I mean, obviously things are working out just fine, but in a way, I wish if I was to change anything, I would do something a bit more broad, like finance, like business, like marketing, because as you said, it's applicable to really anything that you end up doing, even if it's just interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, probably the interpersonal side is probably the stronger side. If I was to say to anybody now what to study, I would study the humanities. I would study psychology. I would study anything about the human, like in terms of, because I think in a world of, we don't know what's real anymore. AI is out there, the human and what's real. So hospitality, the ability to connect with a real person while traveling, it's just going to be sought after more and more and more because people want real.
Absolutely. And I think what's also rare about your story is not this kind of finance and marketing parallel, but time and again, what we are hearing in the kind of overall narrative is that in order to be promoted, in order to grow, in order to learn, in order to make more money,
Yeah.
you need to jump from different companies. So what has been your experience with that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Like for me, the cultural alignment at andBeyond, andBeyond was called CC Africa when I started, Conservation Corporation Africa. We changed our name in 2008. There was a strong alignment of values. Like I felt like what I was doing had a purpose. And I think that's probably what kept me here. And we often used to joke we were paid in sunrises and sunsets because you're in the travel industry. In finance, you could definitely earn more if you went into banking or into proper finance. But there is, the experiences that this place gave me. But they gave, the culture at the time also gave opportunity to learn and to try things. And so, I think it's person dependent. I get bored very quickly. And so I was always looking for challenges. And the organization made itself available for me to step into, if I saw a challenge or I saw something that I could add value to, they allowed me to go, which is a real gift. And I think it's also what kept me here longer because no year was the same. Even in finance, I never did the same thing every year. There was always a little bit of change or a bit of growth or a bit of learning. There's always the temptation that you could earn more if you leave. And that is probably true. You can. Like the studies have been done that if you hop, you'll probably earn more. But what I earned, what I was paid for was experience. I got experiences that I perhaps would never have got anywhere else. And I got the opportunity to grow. And I often say I feel like I have my MBA at andBeyond because I've gone through so many different parts of the business. See like some fingerprints of mine all over. And then, other people have added their fingerprints to it and it's changed and morphed. But you can see that over time. And so you often don't get to learn from yourself if you jump too often. You don't often get to see like what happened to your decision, what happened to that change you make. You don't get that learning. And then I guess it's very culture dependent. It's very much dependent on the organization's capacity to allow you to grow and learn. So I don't think it's the same for, some people might never want to change their job every year and do something different. Some might just want to do the same thing and get really, really good at it. And then, maybe jumping is the right way to do that. But for me, oh my goodness, I was trying to do like a highlights of like my top 10 work highlights and then my top 10 experience highlights, experiences that it's been able to give my children travel. And it's really tough to beat like what I've got to do over 25 years. Been incredible.
I think that is so valuable for this industry. I agree. If I think about like what are those moments where I'm like, wow, that was like in the highlight reel. Most of them happened either because I was working in the travel industry or because of people that I met while working in the travel industry that were able to enable it. And I had a situation early in my career too, where I actually made a decision to stay at a job for money and only for money instead of going actually into the travel industry. I could have been here a couple years earlier. And I regretted it so quickly. And I think I needed to have that experience to understand who I am and what is important to me. And so I find it really refreshing what you're talking about of like, sure, especially with your financial background, you could have gone and made more money. However, you, it sounds like, had these two kind of sides that were encouraging you to move forward. One was you personally being proactive and saying, what else can I learn? What else can I do? Who can I shadow, etc. And then the other side was you were in an organization that was supportive and encouraging of that. So if you're talking to somebody like your daughter, the people who are starting out in the hospitality industry, what are kind of the green flags that people can look for in a company to see that as well? Or maybe the red flags that tell them that's not the place that's going to happen? And what are the things that they can personally do themselves? Is it asking to shadow somebody, or what are the things that you think you did that allowed you to have this incredible career path within one organization?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, a red flag straight away is if whenever vacancies come up or somebody leaves, how do they fill in? Are they filling from the outside all the time, or is there internal movement? Is a great sign as to whether that culture is open to give an opportunity to maybe a rookie who's never done it specifically themselves. I mean, I was put into the CMO role out of, I was the commercial director. I had studied marketing 20 years before that. I had no marketing. I was complete rookie coming in. And I'm eternally grateful to our CEO for that opportunity because, and I think the business did better for it as well because I came in. There's actually a book called Rookie Advantage that shows the benefits of having somebody who's not perhaps an expert in that field come in and ask very, very fresh, naive questions, but it makes everybody question the status quo and what is, and you sort of all learn together. So if the organization is constantly bringing in people from the outside who've got the experience, I mean, sometimes you do need that. There are definite cases for that, but if it's a recurring theme, and you feel like there are people that would be ready to step up into that, but they're not giving the opportunities, I would say that that's a red flag. And then in terms of yourself, in terms of what can you do, I think put your hand up because nobody is going to necessarily ask you. I think that was the one lesson I learned quite quickly, and especially as a female. I think it's easier for men to put their hand up and say, I can do that. And I think, just talking for myself, I'll wait until I'm 99% sure I can do it before I put my hand up.
I was going to say that. I think they've done studies where they're like, men will raise their hand at 50% and women are like, I have to be 99.9% capable in order to think I'm ready for this.
I know. And so you are ready. You are ready. And be uncomfortable with the small discomfort. I think it's in those spaces where you grow. I mean, somebody gave me the analogy of an anorexic hermit crab, which I thought is a great, example. Like the hermit crab has to change its shell when it grows, and the shell that it's got is too small. But it goes through that little risk period where it's got no shell and it's completely exposed until it finds a bigger one that it can grow into. Unfortunately, we as humans don't have the shell. So we just make ourselves thinner and thinner and thinner. So we just shrink into what it is because we're too scared to make that move. And so, don't be an anorexic hermit crab. Put your hand up and say, I'd love to try that. Can I get involved in that project? I know it's not in my wheelhouse, but I'd love to learn. Is there, I'm going to do it after hours, or how can you reframe it? My daughter says I'm a great reframer. Maybe that's why marketing was for me. Like, how can you frame this, that it is part of your job, that you can start to expand and learn and grow? Because it's only that way that people know that you have the aspiration or the desire, or sometimes that you can even do it. I often felt people were surprised when I delivered. I was like, not quite sure how I'm showing up, that this is such a surprise that I could do this. I sort of thought I could do it, but you didn't know until I could show you. And so sometimes you just have to go and show.
So for your situation specifically, was it you raising your hand for the CMO role, or was it you not even thinking that could be an option for you and your CEO tapping you for that?
I think I had a discussion with our CMO just before my predecessor resigned to say that I was interested in learning about digital marketing. That was a career growth thing that I was interested in, and whether I was commercial director at the time, so I was responsible for all of our product selection, our rate strategy, our forecasting, all of our revenue, sort of strategies and business development. And I'd said, I'm interested in digital marketing. It's an area that I'm reading a lot in at the moment, and I'd like to learn more. So it's something I'll do either with the business or outside of the business. And so I had expressed an interest in that space, and then our CMO resigned. And so he approached me, and we had a discussion. So it was a risk for both of us, because if it didn't work, I couldn't go back. My role was taken. But it was a risk for him as well, because he was banking on a rookie. And so, yeah, I've been in the role 10 years now. It's the longest role I've actually occupied in the organization, for a period of time. And it's been the best decision, that I ever made. Yeah.
When you were talking about reframing being the marketer in you, I completely agree with that. I like to joke about it. I call it a PR spin in my own life. Sometimes my husband will be like, "Stop PR spinning me." And I'm like, I'm not even trying. It just happens. But it's so true, because what you see a lot of companies do is CMO has left. Let's look at our competitors and take one of their CMOs. And I think what we were told, or maybe even what the leadership's position is when they do that, is let's bring in an outside perspective, right? And so on the surface, you're like, that makes total sense. But what I'm watching happen right now, a friend's company is exactly this. They brought in a senior leader from a competitor. What that person is trying to do is just recreate what is done at the competitor. It's not really an outside perspective. So what you're saying about you coming from within the business, you know the business, but you don't know marketing in the business yet. You actually have that real outside perspective. It makes me think when I was starting my career, I was in the fashion industry thanks to my little degree. And I had an amazing boss who I was her assistant. She was the SVP of global image at the time. And she turned to me one day and said, "You're going to run backstage at the fashion show." And this is a big deal, New York Fashion Week show. And I literally looked at her and was like, I have never done that. I don't know anything about that. I've barely been backstage. I was backstage once as an intern. I'm like, I couldn't do that. She's like, "You're going to do that." And in my memory, she gave me no more direction. That was it. It was like, it's been settled. Goodbye. And I remember working until, this is before we had laptops that we could bring home, right? I remember sitting at the office till 2, 3 a.m., working away, having binders and systems and structures and all things that I created that I thought would make sense. And I remember on show day, my boss coming to me and saying, "This is the most organized backstage has ever been." And like you said, big risk, big reward. I probably could have got fired if that went a different way. But what did it show me? Oh, I'm actually capable of doing things that I didn't think I was as well.
Also think about how much you worked. Like, how much does somebody coming in who's done this before rest on what they've always done? Like, you had to prove yourself. I had to prove myself.
Yes.
So because failure was there, and it keeps you honest, that you have to shut down the imposter voice, and you just like, failure is not an option. I'm going to do this. And I, those first 2 years are probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life. Similarly to you, because you can't fail. That's not an option. And so you probably, as a business, get so much more out of that person than you would somebody, coming in. I do think, it's such an interesting tightrope to walk, because tenure has its pros and cons. Like, you do need sometimes some fresh eyes in a culture, but there's many different ways of bringing them in. And when you bring in somebody new from the top, you create a lot of pain for the organization, like you do, because I know this organization is an incredibly complex one. We are like if I look at this role, we are a multi-product. So we're travel, a travel planning and a hospitality company, so put here, so a multi-product, multi-channel, we B2B and B2C, interesting tightrope to walk, and a multi-market. So we've got, if I had to plot where our destinations are that our guests travel to versus where our guests come from, there's not much of the world left. So it is, multi-language, multi-currency. There's so many multis that you have to get your head around. Like coming into this organization and understanding it, under one brand. It's a monolithic brand. So it's all under the andBeyond. And now to position ourselves as 3 continents, we were born in Africa, very much known as Africa, to position ourselves as a world-class travel company, but also a world-class, large yacht and camp portfolio, to position ourselves as luxury, but also sustainability. This is not easy. And getting somebody to understand our culture is also difficult. So you've got about an 18-month onboard process before that person is in the same place as somebody who understands what this is. So I think that's the pros and cons, I think, that you sit with in terms of that pain. But I'm grateful it worked out for me. I wouldn't change it.
And you mentioned something that you called the rookie advantage in a book of the same name. If you think back to those first 2 years as CMO, when you were working like crazy and you had this kind of rookie advantage, what are some campaigns or initiatives that you came up with that maybe during that time you thought, I'm not sure, like almost in a way, did you feel like you had to kind of copy paste what had been done before because it was too risky that if you tried something new and it failed, it would mean that you as CMO were failing? Or was it like, we're starting from scratch here, so I'm going to do things my way?
Yeah, I was quite conservative in how I started. I didn't try change too much going forward. My team had quite a bit of trauma before that. So there was a lot of trying to stabilize the team underneath me. There was a lot of me specifically learning from, I brought in some outsourced resource to help me learn, because I also had the opportunity to bring in a very qualified digital marketing manager or give an opportunity to somebody in my team. And I chose instead to invest in learning for both of us. So instead of bringing in a person, I chose to, I had like 3 different resources that I triangulated between. Because what I found with digital marketing, it's almost like diets. Depending on who you talk to, one person will tell you low carb, one person will tell you keto, one person will tell you the carnivore diet, I don't know. And they'll all make sense. And all of them will lose weight. And digital marketing is quite similar. So there's a lot of jargon and there was a lot of learning that I had to do. And so I used these outsources and I bounced off the 3 of them. And so I think I focused at the beginning quite a lot on my social media strategy. There was a big cleanup that we did, and content is where I focused, because I think instinctively I just felt like we had this natural stage. We have these beautiful places. And if we can increase the amount of content, we don't have huge budgets. So I couldn't pay for a lot of paid media or above the line spend, but I could drive organic. And I could use content. And so it was quite a low risk strategy because I actually didn't have a lot to spend. So I had to be clever with how we use the money. So we focused on social media and content. And then as a gift, I didn't really want it, but we were using a website, was a software as a service platform, and they fired us because we were a little bit complicated. We were trying to put a square peg in a round hole with their system, and they eventually said, they were acquired by somebody else, and they said it's not worth it. So I had to rebuild our website. And so, man, that's a learning. I'm still learning. But that has been up since 2017, and it's done really, really well for us in terms of lead generation and content. It's a bit of a beast now we have to tame, but yeah, I was pretty conservative at the beginning. I didn't want to change a lot until I could understand it.
Well, speaking of content and particularly having low budgets, you operate in some really extraordinary places. So, were you looking at social influencers that you could do barter stays with to get that kind of content library up? Or what was your approach to growing that UGC, user generated content?
Yeah, so first it was around, we had an internal editor that was with us full time. And she was writing for we had a magazine, a Butler magazine that she was writing, but it was really just staying internally and had really low reach. And so the initial thing around content was sort of for SEO. So it was digitizing that magazine and putting it online in terms of a blog so that it was part of our site. And she traveled quite a lot and created quite a lot of content herself. So it was using our own internal resource. But then through our PR, we have, PR agencies in 5 of our core markets. We did start looking at specific influencers that would come more to build reach, I guess, from a social media perspective. But now we have, COVID was a gift to us from a marketing perspective because one, when all the guests left, we had this capacity on the ground that you never get again. And we got to play. So we developed a full content platform. We had a podcast. We did virtual safaris where we recorded live. We managed to partner literally 2 days before the country locked down to get a stream, like a broadcaster who streamed live safaris onto one of our reserves. And so we were streaming live safaris twice a day. And then we were using those recordings and selling virtual experiences where our guides, instead of driving a vehicle, would drive Zoom. And it was a way of replenishing their gratuities because they lost revenue as well. They weren't able to drive. And so, we created virtual experiences. We created a sightings platform called WildWatch, a WildWatch sightings platform for guests to be able to, when they came back, were able to post their sightings on our platform, and a magazine, a podcast. Yeah, we had some fun with content while the guests weren't there. We definitely worked pretty hard, but it was a lot of fun. We got to do stuff we would never have had the capacity to do in a normal time. So that took us to a next level from a content perspective.
And does PR sit under your remit as well?
Yeah, it does. All communications as well.
How do you see PR and marketing working together? Because I think depending upon who you ask, sometimes there's like a healthy tension. Sometimes some organizations have them sitting in completely opposite sides of the building. Sometimes they're all together. Like, how do you view that?
Well, we saw PR, specifically editorial PR, as a big part of our strategy. So when you've got a small budget and we're trying to get brand awareness, our biggest thing that we have in our hand is our experience, and we trust that experience implicitly. So most of our PR goes to editorial coverage, and most of the time we don't travel with the journalist or the editor. We trust the teams on the ground. They need to have the experience as they have the experience. We will host a group trip if a lodge is launching. We'll host a group trip. But otherwise, as a marketing team, we don't host journalists. We allow them to experience it as it is because we trust that experience. And it's a large. I think it's a lot of the way that we built our organic traffic is through editorial. So we're not paying for it. We can't control it. It's the scariest thing, I think, for a lot of marketers. You can't control it. But it's worked for us. It's how, if I have to evaluate the return I get on above the line spend to editorial, we have started playing with some editorial and some display because we need some bigger reach. But PR for us has mostly been around media hosting and pitching stories and getting people to experience the product and writing about it. And that has, it's sat really well within marketing in terms of doing that.
I agree. And I think the reason consumers are so trusting of PR coverage versus an ad or something is exactly what you just said. by and large, they are trusting or believing that the journalist had that experience on their own. So if they are reporting back and saying it was this life-changing moment for them, all of a sudden the reader is going to go, I want to book that. And I have actually booked a trip once based on, it was a spread in a Far magazine, and it was a full page picture of a plate of pasta with truffles on it. And based on that image alone, I read the whole article and planned an entire trip to Umbria just because of that article. So, and that's even print coverage too, not to mention the long tail efforts of digital coverage as well. So I agree. It is a part and parcel of a strong marketing strategy.
Yeah, it is. And when you've got a small budget, I think for us, it was a clever way of using it, because it's the most, I guess, trust building, as have somebody else speak about your experience as they've physically experienced it. Yeah.
In addition to growing your career over the last 25 years with andBeyond, I imagine you have seen expectations from guests shift quite a bit. What do you think is different now? What do you think is still the same?
So I think, the places that we operate in have always been sort of, I hate the word, but bucket list destinations that people might only want to travel to once, and then sort of move on. So there's always the risk that they just come for the photograph of what they've seen, perhaps in that article, or perhaps what they've seen on National Geographic. Like they want that experience. I mean, no real understanding of how long those cameramen had to sit on the side of that river to get that, wildebeest crossing to come across. But we are seeing a deeper appreciation for these rare and irreplaceable places, and probably more, less about ticking boxes and seeing the icons, more deeper questions. Why this place? Why now? What impact does my presence have? It feels like there's a need to connect, like deeply connect. They want authenticity and meaning. So there's a feeling you still get the Instagram. I want to stand here. I want that picture. I've seen the lion. That's enough. I want to move on. But you certainly do see guests slowing down and being more present as to where they are and why they're there. And it's in that space that they start to care. So that's the part that gives, like post-COVID, we just saw this wave of people wanting to be in nature coming back. And I mean, that's where we operate. So, and it has retreated a little bit from that, that COVID tsunami. I always say COVID was like a tsunami. It was the guests, the water going out was the guests all leaving. And then the next year it was like this huge wave of guests coming back. And it has normalized to a point, but it still seems to be, even in local destinations for the US, nature is up there. There's this feeling of like, we need to connect back to something. And so we do see that, this need to reconnect with it responsibly and thoughtfully.
Yeah. Peter Greenberg, who's the travel editor for CBS News, he was recently on the show, and he was talking about how at first glance, people can kind of undervalue the travel industry. And he's like, you see how valuable and how crucial it is to humanity when you take it away from people. And it's exactly what you said about that tsunami of the moment we all felt you can't go anywhere, we were desperate to get back out there.
Very much. And Africa was high on the list, yeah.
I bet. You referenced it earlier too, sustainability, really crucial to not only andBeyond, but especially these places that you are entrusted with protecting, with making sure future generations will be able to visit and enjoy. You personally are overseeing your 2030 impact strategy. Can you talk a bit about the company's focus on sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we see our responsibility as being an enabler or catalyst. Our shareholders have incredible intent. I mean, they're not forgiving from a commercial perspective. We have to make a return, but we cannot make that return at the expense of people or the planet. So we cannot be extractive in any way. And then they have a framework around responsible business, net positive business, and a transformative sort of shared value, where you're a catalyst for a change in a system. And so we sit, in these places. Our business depends on the existence of these places going forward. We are a low volume, high cost turnover model. So most of our properties average 10 rooms. They're small. Like I used an example. I think I stayed in a hotel in Canada, in Lake Louise, that Fairmont Chateau. I think that had 500 rooms. I think it's got more rooms than our whole portfolio in one property. Like, just to give you the complexity in the operations. They're small properties set on large tracts of land, sometimes, or adjacent to large tracts of land that we're contributing to. And so we, each landscape has a slightly different impact potential, but at a minimum, we have to be responsible and do no harm. So that's energy, waste, water. In most places, we are looking at how we can, one, improve the conservation status of these places, and two, improve the conservation ambassadorship of the partner communities, the people living alongside them. So we work with Wild Impact, our social and conservation development partner, to on a like sort of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs framework. So we'll look first at social services infrastructure like healthcare, early learning, and primary and secondary education, and what communities need in those spaces, working with them to identify those needs. And then we'll go up into sort of tertiary education bursaries and environmental awareness lessons in schools surrounding. We're wanting to create sort of like wildlife ambassadors in kids from young ages up, that they're focused on conservation, that they understand climate change, they understand how their behavior affects their landscape. And then the last is thriving communities, where we focus on small business development and climate resilience, like food security and water security. And so it's this holistic, very holistic model. And I guess we've, since 1992, so 1 year after we were formed, we've worked with Wild Impact. Our 2030 vision is to do more. So, we set it after 30 years, and then we said in a third of the time, we wanted to double what we've done. So there was a sense of urgency, more reach in the communities that we operate in, more landscapes, so expansion of our own footprint, and then more leverage in terms of leveraging guests, inviting them to join us to conserve these places. So, yeah, I think my first experience at andBeyond, I was an audit clerk. I went to my first safari in a reserve in South Africa. I'd grown up in South Africa my whole life, but I'd never been on a luxury safari. I'd always done the self-drive in the national park with my parents. It was my first time. It was this piece of land that had been rewilded. So it was only 8 years into the story. It was still pretty wild. The animals were still pretty shy. But I started hearing about what, our founders had agreed at the time, that instead of building a higher fence to keep people out, they built a longer table. And it's this generosity of this longer table, both for our guests, but also for the stakeholders around our business, that has kept me here. Because there's purpose in that. There's purpose where you get up every day, you work should be 8, 10, 12 hours, 14 hours. And at the end, you can see the impact that you have in guests' lives and in people's lives. We are 2,500 andBeyonders. Soon, in the next 5 years, will be over 3,000. And it's, we have an annual Employee of the Year award, where we bring the winners of each region into Johannesburg. It's called our Battalier Awards. Our logo is the Battalier Eagle. And we share their stories, because these employees are ones that are custodians of our culture, of care of land, wildlife, and people. It is my favorite day of the year, because you are completely humbled by people who have relatively very little, but whose lives they're just giving and giving and giving. Giving from a word perspective, giving to their community, giving to conservation. It is properly humbling. And that's I guess that's why I've stayed here and why I was very fortunate the last 3 years to be able to work together with the CEO of Wild Impact and a steering committee of our operational directors to work on this framework that we're now measuring ourselves on until 2030. So it's been hugely fulfilling.
I think it's so exciting to hear about companies taking that seriously and really wanting to do good and using their money to do good. Do you feel like guests care? Do you feel like sustainability is something that we should do because it's the right thing to do and guests don't really care? Or do you think maybe once they're on property and we're able to show them and tell them why it's important, then they care more? What do you think?
Yeah, I've argued with myself so much. I tried to get a conversation with Google to say, can we, how do we get guests to ask different questions? And they were like, we don't get guests to ask different questions. We just try to answer the questions they have and then try to develop tools to answer it as completely and accurately as possible. And the response, the conversation that I had was, you need to focus on the younger generation.
And that's what you guys are doing by going into schools. I think that's such an important part of it.
But for our guests, I think there is a consciousness that's changing. I think the luxury, true luxury, is actually knowing that you're going to be comfortable, but at the same time, you're doing no harm. I think that's a true luxury. And I think there's almost an onus on us as the operator to make sure that that's the case. Specifically, we're not charging small rates. And so it should be built in from the guest. Just by coming, the guest is making a difference. We would love them to join us, but first you've got to get them to care, and they're never going to care unless they choose you. So I think we changed our name in 2008 to andBeyond from Conservation Corporation Africa, or CC Africa. And at the time, the brand agency that worked on it did some exercises with research groups. Now, this was 2008, and they asked them whether sustainability was important, and they all said the right things. They all said yes. But when they gave them a task to do, and they had to design their ultimate, safari lodge, sustainability didn't even come into the question when they designed it. So there was a disconnect between how they behaved and what they said. And I'd sort of hoped post-COVID, it might be different. And it certainly is changing. There is, all of the tools. Travelers have been doing a great job of on the digital platforms, making the sustainability credentials a little bit easier to find and making the information more available, be it TripAdvisor or Google or Bookings. They've all got sustainability or eco badges. I think the younger generation might start asking those questions, and it'll be more than just what's the tick box that you've self-audited yourself on those platforms, but actually talking to the staff at a lodge, you can find out a lot of information about what's true or not true by just engaging and opening your eyes when you look around. But so I think people are still looking for a holiday. They're still looking for a reconnection. They're still looking for, what's in it for me. We believe it's our responsibility, specifically because of where we operate and what our business depends on, that it's our choice. We've taken the choice away from you. You make the choice about a trusted luxury adventure. We're going to give you an adventure that's beyond your expectations. And one of those expectations is that we're easing your conscience by your choice to come. Because you've used you've flown from California to the middle of Africa. That's a long way. There's a lot of carbon in that. Why come? Well, you make quite a big difference to the places that depend on that tourism revenue. And we felt that when guests went away, these places are at risk without responsible tourism. Not extractive tourism, responsible tourism.
Even the example you gave with the Zoom tours, at first you're like, oh, that was just a revenue generator for the company. And you're like, no, that's for our guides, because they're losing out on that money. And that's such a good reframe. And even with what you're doing with going into schools, I think about when I was a kid, my dad still makes fun of me coming home and being like, no, we have to turn the water off while we're brushing our teeth. We don't just leave it on. And that was something that was like instilled in me in school. And now my daughter, she's 3.5, they're doing a whole recycling unit at school. And so now when she's in the bath, she's pointing out which bottles have the recycling triangle on it. And she's asking, which bin do we put it in? And quite frankly, my husband and I are like, we need to recycle more. She's totally right. So it's a really good approach, I think, of starting at the beginning almost to make it the questions that you ask.
Yeah, no, and 100%. I mean, I think children traveling, that's another reason why children should travel. I mean, I know I've traveled with my kids since they were tiny. They came with, and it's an education. Travel is an education. Like, what do you give your children by opening their minds to a whole lot of different cultures, different places? It creates a tolerance that, I don't think is easy to get from like just a traditional education where you're in the same culture the whole time. How you travel does matter, like what you do with them, but it's taking them on safari and then learning about animals that they've never seen before from a guide who is, I think I learned from them again, because you're almost experiencing that first time every time they experience something, like a little dung beetle pushing its little dung ball up a hill. That can fascinate a child. I mean, it really is. And then it's like rolling and then it falls and it's like a game. And how long is it going to take? And do you think it's going to make it? And there's two of them. And are they racing? And it's an amazing, it keeps the adults quite entertained at the same time. It's an amazing school.
Nicole, I want to ask you the last 3 questions that I ask every guest. And the first is, what was the best hospitality experience that you've ever had?
So, this is a hard one because I could get, like, if any one of my teams listen to this call, they're going to say, why didn't you choose? Because I've had some incredible experiences traveling with andBeyond. I'm very biased. But and maybe this one was special to me because it was experience. We opened a property in Bhutan, a small tented camp in the Punakha Valley. And there was always this question, especially coming from Africa and being very comfortable in what hospitality meant in a African context. It was always a curiosity as like, how is that going to translate across in Bhutan? And so I can remember I was actually hosting a media trip and we had gone on an excursion out the lodge, and there is no straight road in Bhutan. It's like just windy. And we had gone to a nunnery that was at the top of a hill, and then we had gone to see sort of an authentic farm village even further up. And it had taken quite a long time. And it was like around lunchtime, and we were on our way back down, and I knew how long it had taken us to get there. And in my head, I'm working out, sure, we're going to get back to that lodge pretty late. Like, I'm sure these ladies are hungry now. Like, I wonder how long it's going to take. I wonder if the stuff is ready. And as we came around a corner, there was an open forest patch with prayer flags hanging, and the bus stopped, and there a butler had set up a picnic table. Now, we were about an hour and a half away from the lodge, but they had set up a picnic table and had this beautiful picnic lunch for us in the middle of this forest with prayer flags overlooking the Punakha Valley with the song. Completely unexpected, but exactly what we needed at that time. And I think that for me is, our teams do this all the time. I don't know how they make you feel seen for what you need before you need to ask. It's an incredible, incredible gift of hospitality to make somebody feel seen like this. And it was quite funny because as one of the journalists stepped off the bus, she said, I should have known andBeyond would do something like this. It's become expected that there will be some sort of surprise or delight that meets you exactly where you're at, just when you need it. That being seen and creating that feeling of they thought of me right now. And I think, that for me was my, I think it was a favorite, because I was like, yes, they've got this.
Right at the moment when you started to think I'm hungry, they were like, ta-da, here we are.
Yeah, and also this was in Asia, and they translated the experience beautifully to exactly what it would have been different in Africa, but they found a way to make it exactly the same. That's feeling the same in Asia. So
on the opposite side of that incredible experience, what was the worst hospitality experience that you've ever had?
I'm so bad at saying the worst. It's like one of my Achilles heel. Like I always reframe everything so it's not. And then also because I'm normally comped or I'm not paying, I always like, well, maybe it's because I'm like not a proper guest. So I can't think of one. I mean, I traditionally, because of the way we do stuff, I do find it hard to travel to traditional hotels with. I sometimes find that check-in experience is really, really impersonal in terms of how they do it. It's not a way to make you feel welcome. You almost feel like you're bothering people, and that check-in process, I think, in some places could always be refined to make it just a little bit more like we've been expecting you. Welcome. It's I walked into a hotel in Zurich and it was actually the wrong hotel, but they greeted us so warmly that I was so sad to leave because it wasn't our hotel. And we went across to our hotel, and then I was quite disappointed because the greeting at that other hotel, which was the wrong one, was much, much better. So I think, taking away that desk, making it feel like you're coming into a lounge or something that like this is a place where you're welcome or you can feel like home. I think there's a lot we can do there as an industry.
Final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, a person, a brand that you think has truly mastered it? And you can't say andBeyond.
No, I won't say andBeyond, but I will say, I mean, this is going to sound so corny, but I read Unreasonable Hospitality last year. I can never say his name properly, Gadera. And I think his definition of hospitality is, about being, it's about creating a feeling. For me, it's about being seen. But I do think his hot dog story that he tells in there is a pretty powerful one. I know we've used it ourselves to train. I also think for me, attention. Attention is one of the greatest forms of hospitality, especially in a distracted world at the moment. If you can make the person in front of you feel like they're the only person in the world right now, I think that is an incredible, incredible gift. There are certain people in my life that do that to me, and there's certain people where I feel completely the opposite. And as soon as you see somebody check this out.
She's holding up her phone for anyone who's listening.
Holding up my phone. I actually just if I am having something in person, I want us to make a phone stack and put it on the table and not look at it. Because there's nothing that makes you feel more dismissed than somebody looking into their phone. I mean, they might, be checking the time. It might be completely fine, but it's a pet peeve.
I completely agree with that. It frustrates me to no end. Nicole, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such an enjoyable conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. I've loved chatting with you.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. It's rare to see someone with the level of career progression, not to mention departmental variety, at the same company as Nicole has experienced. Her take on why this was possible came down to two factors. One, we need to work for companies and for leaders who believe in promoting from within, who are willing to take chances on people who might not be the obvious choice. And two, we have to be the type of person who raises our hand, who says yes to opportunities before we feel ready, who are willing to risk failure in order to grow. As Nicole says to her daughter, we have to learn how to learn. And if we do, then what we lack in experience, we will more than make up for with what she called the rookie advantage. We will work harder. We will try more. We will push ourselves further, not just to prove to others that we belong, but to prove it to ourselves. sometimes being underestimated, can actually be our greatest asset. There's a beautiful parallel between Nicole's career path and the journeys that andBeyond creates for its guests. Both are about stepping into the unfamiliar. Both stretch you just beyond what feels safe. And both show you not only what's possible in the world, but what's possible for yourself. And whether she started in marketing or not, Nicole has mastered one of the most powerful tools in branding, the reframe. It's why she told us she struggles to name a truly bad hospitality experience, because she instinctively looks for context, for intention, for what might have been happening behind the scenes. And that mindset of curiosity over criticism isn't just how she approaches travel, but how she approached her entire career. As she said, the solution to any problem is rarely to build a higher fence, but instead to create a longer table. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media @sweetsuccesspodcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.